Somewhere in your china cabinet right now, there may be a single cup worth more than everything else in the room combined. There are 7 old teacups that are secretly worth a fortune, and the odds are not as long as you think that one of them is yours. Not the good set, the one that only comes out at Christmas. I mean the odd cup at the back, the one with no matching saucer, the single piece wrapped in. A tea towel inside a box that has said kitchen misk on the side since the last house move. I have arranged tonight in order of value, so the numbers climb every single time, and I have saved the most valuable object of any kind I have ever personally valued for the very end. Stay with me, because number 1 is not just the most valuable cup on this list. It is the most expensive cup ever sold anywhere on this earth. A little painted thing small enough to sit inside your closed fist, the sort of object that gets 50 pence at. A car boot sale from someone in a hurry to clear a table, and it sold for $36 million. By the end of tonight, you will pick up every cup in that cabinet, turn it over, and read the base, the way a bank clerk reads a signature. Let me be straight with you before we open the cabinet, because false hope helps nobody, and I have no interest in wasting your evening. Most old china is worth very little. That is the honest flaw under everything I am about to tell you. Ordinary tea services, even pretty ones, even old ones, regularly make 10 or 20 pounds for the whole, set at a general sale, and I will not pretend otherwise to keep you watching. But 40-odd years standing at the rostrum taught me something else entirely, which is that teacups are the single, widest gap in this entire trade between what a thing looks like and what a thing actually is. 2 cups can sit on the same shelf, same size, same shape, both covered in flowers, and one is worth £2 and the other is worth 2,000. And the entire difference is a mark on the base smaller than your thumbnail that nobody in that house has looked at in 30 years. My name doesn't matter as much as the job did. Call it 4 decades an auctioneer and valuer, most of it across the English counties. More probate clearances and house valuations than any one man should probably admit to in public. I'm not selling anything tonight. I have nothing in a box waiting for your money. What I have is a lifetime of watching genuinely valuable china get swept into a house clearance van alongside genuinely worthless china at the exact same price, because nobody in the room could tell the two apart. So before we start, one honest request. Most people watching this are not subscribed, and if finding out what the ordinary things in your own house are actually worth is useful to you, it costs nothing to fix that, and you can always change your mind later. Right. Cabinet open. Let's go through it properly. Number 7, Royal Albert. I start here on purpose because this is the single most common name you will find in an English china cabinet, and most of it, including the famous Old Country Roses pattern everyone's grandmother seemed to own, is genuinely modest money. 10 or 15 pounds a trio at most general sales. That is not the interesting part. The interesting part is the early Royal Albert, the 1920s and 30s patterns, and specifically the patterns that were only produced for a short run before being discontinued. Those sell cup by cup, sometimes saucerless, for 50, 80, occasionally over £100, because somewhere there is a collector with 11 place settings, of a pattern that stopped being made in 1934, and your single surviving cup is the 12th they have been hunting for years. Your test tonight is simple. Turn the cup over, photograph the pattern name stamped on the base, and search that exact name, because in this particular category, the pattern is the entire price, not the maker. I once watched a mixed box of 30 assorted cups sell for £8 at a house clearance, and 2 of those 30 were a discontinued pattern that a specialist dealer resold individually for more than the entire box had made an hour earlier. Number 6, Belleek, the Irish porcelain, made so thin that held up to a window you can genuinely read print through the wall of the cup. with a soft pearl-like shine, unlike anything English factories were producing at the same time. Modern Belleek is pleasant and affordable. Early Belleek, marked with the black harp and hound stamp, used from 1863 through to 1946, is a different conversation entirely, with early pieces and unusual shapes regularly making hundreds of pounds, and the rarest forms considerably more. Your test tonight is about color, not shape. A black printed mark means old. A green or gold mark means later production. Still lovely, worth far less. And handle it over a folded towel on a table, never over a sink with the tap running. Because I have personally watched a £200 cup become a 2p pile of shards in the time it takes water to hit porcelain from a height of 4 inches. Number 5. Moorcroft. This is the one most families walk straight past because it does not look like china at all in the way people expect. William Moorcroft started as a young designer in 1897 and within a handful of years had perfected a technique called tube lining, where the outline of a pattern is piped onto the piece by hand using liquid clay, leaving a slightly raised edge that you can genuinely feel with a fingertip before you have even turned the piece over to look for a mark. He opened his own pottery in 1912, backed by Liberty of London, and the early patterns from that period, toadstools, poppies, irises, signed personally by Moorcroft himself, are the pieces collectors chase hardest, regularly making several £1,000s for a single strong example. Later production, still using the same tube lining technique, is much more accessible, often under £100. Your test tonight is entirely in your fingertips. Close your eyes and run a thumb across the pattern. If you can feel the outline standing proud of the surface like a raised road on a map, a human hand piped that line. Generations before anyone had heard of a factory transfer print, and that hand-piped outline is worth actively hunting for a signature underneath. If any of this is useful so far, a genuine like helps this reach the people who are about to clear out a house without knowing to look. Either way, we are only halfway through, and it gets considerably more interesting from here. Number 4, Shelley. If you take one name away from tonight, take this one, because Shelley made superb bone china right through to the 1960s, and the collector market for it is worldwide and, frankly, hungry. The ordinary florals bring £30 to £80 a trio, already ahead of most competitors. But the Art Deco shapes, sold under names like Vogue, Mode, and Eve, with triangular handles and cups shaped like inverted cones, sell for £200 to £800 a trio, and the rarest patterns in those shapes have made considerably more at specialist sales. Your test tonight is to look at the silhouette before you even think about the pattern painted on it. Because with Shelley, the shape of the cup is doing most of the talking. Check the loft as well as the cabinet, because deco china fell entirely out of fashion for the better part of 50 years. And unfashionable is exactly how so much of it managed to survive, packed away and untouched, until fashion quietly came back around to find it. Number 3. Clarice Cliff, the most famous name in English Art Deco pottery, sold under the name Bazaar, painted in oranges, yellows and blues so bright they look almost too cheerful to be worth serious money, which is precisely why so many families have underpriced it for decades. A single conical cup and saucer in a strong pattern sells for £200 to £600. The named rare patterns that collectors chase specifically, rather than the pattern family generally, turn an ordinary shape into a 4-figure item on a good day. And complete early tea sets have made considerably more than that at auction. Your test tonight is to look for the painted or stamped Bazaar mark on the base and then search the specific pattern name. Because with Clarice Cliff, the rarity of the pattern is nearly the whole value. One honest warning that comes free with the fame. She is well known enough to have been faked. So anything that looks like a serious contender deserves a specialist's eye before it earns a price tag, not a guess from across the room. Number 2. Wedgwood Fairyland Lustre. Now we are in genuinely serious territory. In the 1920s, a designer named Daisy McKeag Jones created a range for Wedgwood unlike anything the factory had made before or has made since. Midnight blues and deep greens shot through with an iridescent shimmer, hand-painted with elves, imps, and tiny goblin bridges picked out in gold. It sold poorly at the time, which is exactly why so little of it survives today, and that scarcity is why it is now one of the single most valuable things Wedgwood ever produced. Small pieces start in the high hundreds of pounds. Cups and saucers regularly make £1,000 to £3,000, and the important large vases have sold for tens of thousands. Your test tonight is to stop the moment you see it. Any piece with that deep midnight ground, that rainbow-coloured lustre sheen, and tiny fantastical figures painted into a landscape deserves nothing more than a photograph of the Wedgwood mark and a message to a specialist, because this is a category where one odd forgotten cup has genuinely funded a family's holiday. And now, number 1. Not because it requires any special skill to identify at a glance, but because nothing else in any cabinet in this country makes the same claim and can actually back it up with an auction record. Number 1. Chinese porcelain. Specifically, the small bowls and cups at the very back of the cabinet that every family calls the Oriental bits, brought home by a great-grandfather who served overseas. Picked up at a church bazaar for a few shillings, inherited from someone nobody quite remembers anymore. Most of it, honestly, is worth modest money, and that is the truthful flaw once again. But Chinese porcelain is the single most explosive category in this entire trade, because the finest imperial pieces are identified by rain marks. Small stacked characters painted onto the base that almost no family in this country can read, and those marks occasionally turn a 50-pence car boot object into a national news story. In 2014, a tiny Ming Dynasty cup barely 3 inches across, painted with a rooster, a hen, and their chicks, made during the reign of the Emperor Chenghua in the 1460s, sold at auction in Hong Kong for $36 million, the record price for any cup from any century anywhere on Earth. Only 17 of those cups are known to survive today, and several are already sitting in museums, which is exactly why every single one still in private hands matters this much. I'm not telling you that is sitting in your cabinet. The odds are genuinely against it. But British and American families have turned up 5, 6, and 7-figure Chinese pieces inside perfectly ordinary houses more than once in the last 2 decades, because someone finally turned the piece over instead of just dusting around it. Your test tonight is the entire point of this video. Stop judging any cup in that cabinet by whether it is pretty. Turn every single one over, photograph any character mark you cannot read, and put it in front of someone who can. Because in this category, the bottom of the cup is worth considerably more than the top. Every single item tonight came down to the same habit. Take the cup out of the cabinet, turn it over in decent light, read the mark, feel the decoration under your thumb, and decide nothing at all from across the room. Royal Albert, where the pattern is the entire price. Belleek, thin enough to read through and fragile enough to respect. Moorcroft, worth feeling for before you ever look for a signature. Shelley, where the shape does the talking. Clarice Cliff, cheerful enough to be underpriced for decades. Wedgwood's Fairyland pieces, poorly sold once and priceless now precisely because of it. And Chinese porcelain, where the record for any cup on Earth was quietly sitting in an ordinary collection until somebody finally checked. Every single one of these looked, to an untrained eye, exactly like the ordinary china around it. That camouflage is the entire reason so much of it survived a century without being broken, sold off cheap, or thrown away. And it is exactly why it is in danger the day a house finally gets cleared by someone in a hurry. So before any box gets packed, before the most efficient relative in the family turns up with bin bags and good intentions, sit down at that cabinet yourself. Put a folded towel on the table and go through it properly with a cup of tea in your hand. Ideally, not one of the ones you are inspecting. If this has you looking sideways at your own cabinet right now, a like tells me it is worth making more of these. And subscribing means you will see the next one, where we open the drawer underneath the cabinet. The everyday cutlery drawer nobody has properly sorted since a wedding decades ago, because certain ordinary-looking spoons and forks sitting in that drawer right now are worth hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds each. And scrap dealers are quietly paying families nothing more than melt value for them every week. Tell me below, what is the oldest cup in your cabinet, and whose was it before it became yours? I read every single comment, and this trade has proven me wrong about a cabinet often enough that I no longer doubt yours. Go and have a proper look. You never know.